I remember the sting of that night as if it happened yesterday. We were at a grand hotel ballroom in Manhattan celebrating my cousin's wedding. Chandeliers glittered overhead. A live band filled the room with music that made the wine glasses tremble. I sat at table 12, labeled with a golden card that read, VIP Family. My partner Alex leaned close to a friend and whispered words that carved themselves into me like glass against skin. If I could do it again, I'd still choose Morgan over Harper. Morgan, the old flame. The one Alex's family used to mention with a wistful smile. I tightened my grip on the champagne flute until I feared it would shatter. 2 feet away, yet I was invisible. The room laughed and clinked glasses around me. People toasted love, toasted wealth, toasted futures brighter than the chandeliers. I smiled the way you do when you know a camera is pointed your way. A smile made of porcelain. My chest, though, was stone. Loneliness is strange at a wedding. Surrounded by hundreds, I felt more alone than if I'd been locked in a silent room. No one noticed the silence in my eyes. No one cared that the person I shared my home and my bed with had just erased me in one sentence. The music swelled. Alex laughed too loudly at a joke I didn't hear. My fork touched the plate carving lines through untouched steak. I forced my face to stay calm. If I showed pain, it would be mine forever. But if I swallowed it, perhaps it could stay hidden. But it did not stay hidden. It festered. I thought about our life together. The apartment with the white marble counters I had saved years. To buy the joint savings account nearing $1 million. The estate I had inherited from my grandparents that Alex often spoke of, as if it belonged to both of us. Stability had been my gift. But Alex apparently craved passion, even if it meant tearing me down. The humiliation came not just from the words, but from the ease with which they were spoken. Not a slip, not an accident, a casual confession over wine in the middle of someone else's joy. I sat there as though shackled, sipping a drink that suddenly tasted bitter. When the bride danced with her father, tears filled the eyes of guests. I remembered my own wedding day 6 years earlier. The vows we made under an oak tree, the promises whispered in private. Were those lies too? Or had they simply expired like milk left too long in the sun? I kept my silence, though my mind screamed. Later that night, back at home, Alex held my hand in the cab, laughed with me about the food, and kissed me goodnight. No trace of regret. That perhaps was the cruelest part. To know they could betray me with words and still wear the mask of a perfect partner. And yet I said nothing. Because sometimes silence is more powerful than confrontation. Silence gathers weight. Silence remembers. Would you forgive someone who says this at a wedding? Tell me where you're watching from and hit subscribe. We need to talk about loyalty, betrayal, and the quiet storms that tear families apart. But this was only the beginning. The whisper was not just a careless sentence, it was a map leading me toward secrets I hadn't imagined. I'll explain in a moment. The morning after the wedding, I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee, steam rising like a veil. The night's whisper replayed in my head, word for word, as if it had been etched into bone. Alex breezed into the room with a smile, kissed my forehead, and poured cereal into a bowl like nothing was wrong. "Great wedding yesterday," I said, stirring my coffee. My voice was steady, but inside I trembled. Made me think about our own wedding day. Alex laughed, spoon clinking against the bowl. "Ours was better, no question." "Really?" I tilted my head. "You don't have any regrets about how things turned out?" The pause was a fraction too long. Then Alex reached across the table, squeezed my hand, and said, "Of course not. I married exactly who I was supposed to marry." The lie slid out so smoothly, it almost sounded true. That was when I understood lies weren't mistakes. Lies were a language Alex had mastered. I didn't argue. I let the silence swallow us, but I made a decision. From then on, I would pay closer attention. And so I watched. Little things I had once ignored suddenly grew sharp. Alex's phone always tilted away when I walked into the room. The late nights at work that never added up. The forced laughter at dinners, the way Alex's gaze often seemed far away, lost in a memory of someone else. Weeks later, Alex announced that Amanda, the old college friend, was coming over for a girls' night. "Sounds fun," I said, smiling thinly. "You don't have to leave. We're just going to drink wine and gossip," Alex replied. "No, you two should have privacy," I answered. "I'll catch up on some work in the garage." The garage, though, shared a wall with the kitchen. Years earlier, I had discovered how easily sound traveled through the cheap construction. That night, laptop open but ignored, I listened. Amanda arrived with a bottle of red wine. Their voices started light work, gossip, mutual friends' laughter that bubbled too easily. But wine loosens lips, and soon the conversation shifted. "So how are things with you and Harper?" Amanda asked. "Fine," Alex replied. The word hung there flat. "Fine doesn't sound great." Alex sighed. "It's not that anything's wrong. Harper is a good partner. Responsible, stable, provides for me. But sometimes I wonder if stable is enough." At the wedding, watching the bride and groom, they looked so passionate. When was the last time Harper and I felt that? "Marriage changes," Amanda said softly. "I know. But what if it was never there to begin with? What if I chose Harper because it was safe, not because I couldn't imagine life without them?" Amanda was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, "Are you thinking about someone else?" "Yes," Alex whispered. "Sometimes I still think about Morgan, about what could have been if things hadn't fallen apart." The words pierced me more than the wedding whisper, because now I knew it wasn't nostalgia. It was longing, a desire alive and growing, tucked behind my back like a knife, waiting to be used. When Amanda left hours later, Alex came to bed and kissed me more tenderly than usual. Guilt has its own form of affection. I let Alex's arm rest across me, but my eyes stared at the dark ceiling. I knew now that I was living with a stranger. The next morning, while Alex showered, I sat in the office. My hand shook slightly as I opened the laptop and flipped through folders, pretending to look for receipts. And that was when I saw it, an email printed and folded neatly, left on the desk as if waiting to be found. The subject line chilled me: "Divorce Consultation, Division of Estate and Joint Savings." My heart slowed heavy and deliberate like a drum in an empty hall. I traced the ink with my finger. It wasn't speculation anymore. Alex wasn't just dreaming of Morgan. Alex was planning a future without me. And I realized something: betrayal is never private. It always leaves paper messages, receipts, objects that carry the truth even when mouths lie. I tucked the email back exactly where I found it. If Alex thought I was blind, let it stay that way. Because silence had now become my shield, and silence would buy me time. But what Alex didn't know was that silence was also sharpening into something else: revenge. The house felt different that night. Amanda was coming again, another so-called girls' night. I told Alex I had work to finish and retreated to the garage. But I wasn't working. I was waiting. The wine was uncorked by 8. Their laughter floated through the thin wall, bouncing into my space like ghosts. I sat at the workbench, pen in hand, pretending to write while every word slid into me. "So," Amanda began, voice already a little looser, "how's life with Harper?" Alex sighed. "Stable, predictable. Harper always does the right thing, pays the bills, keeps the apartment in perfect order. But sometimes..." The voice dropped low, the kind of tone lovers use in private. "Sometimes I wonder if safe is the same as love." Amanda murmured something I couldn't catch, and then Alex said it clear as a bell. "When I think of passion, I think of Morgan. We had fire. With Harper, it feels like I signed a contract, not a love story." My hand clenched around the pen until it snapped in two. The ink bled across the paper, a dark smear I couldn't control. That was the truth of it. Our marriage wasn't a home, it was a document. I had become a signature, a name on a deed, a person who paid for comfort, nothing more. Amanda tried to soothe. "That was over 10 years ago, Alex." "I know, but sometimes I imagine the life we'd have if his parents hadn't interfered." I sat frozen. His. That word confirmed what I already suspected: Morgan wasn't just a memory. Morgan was the phantom Alex still loved. The conversation drifted to softer tones, giggles muffled by wine, but I had heard enough. It wasn't nostalgia, it was desire. Later, when the house fell quiet and Alex's breathing turned heavy in sleep, I wandered the living room. On the coffee table sat Alex's phone, face down, still warm from use. A part of me wanted to lift it to scroll until I found proof. But proof wasn't necessary anymore. Words overheard in the dark carry more weight than any text message. Instead, I turned to the desk where Alex often left papers. There, tucked under a stack of bills, was a folder. Inside, carefully printed, were financial documents, withdrawal slips, bank statements, accounts I hadn't authorized. Alex had been moving money quietly. I closed the folder, slid it back in place, and stood in the silence. My heart didn't race. Instead, I felt calm, cold even. Because betrayal isn't just about love, it's about strategy. And Alex had revealed the strategy too soon. The next morning, Alex brewed coffee, like usual, humming along with the radio. I smiled, kissed a cheek, and went about my day as though nothing had shifted. That was the key I would not confront. Confrontation gives power to the guilty. No, I would observe. Record, wait. And then, almost as if fate wanted to give me another weapon, I found something unexpected. A laptop left unlocked on the dining table. Alex had stepped into the shower, the sound of running water filling the apartment. I touched the trackpad, the screen flickered awake, and there it was, a draft email, never sent, written to a lawyer. It read, "If we separate how much of Harper's inheritance and estate would legally belong to me, would the one Fay $2 million savings account be considered marital property? I want clarity before making any decisions." Clarity. That word mocked me. Alex wasn't just unhappy. Alex was preparing to carve me open financially, to strip me of what I had worked and saved for. I closed the laptop carefully, wiped my fingerprints from the lid with my sleeve, and placed it exactly where it had been. Then I sat in the quiet, my reflection staring back at me from the dark window. The world outside was still, but inside me something had changed. The wound had turned into armor. Alex thought I was safe. Alex thought I was stable. Alex thought silence meant weakness. But what Alex didn't know was that silence can be the beginning of revenge, and revenge, when it arrives, carries the weight of truth. It was my mother's birthday, a gathering she cherished every year. She loved nothing more than seeing her children and grandchildren in one room, laughter echoing off the walls of her suburban home. This time, though, the laughter would cut sharper than knives. The dining room table was long enough to seat 20. A polished oak surface reflected candlelight glasses of red wine and silverware that clinked with each toast. My mother sat at the head, glowing her friends, and our relatives showering her with praise. I had brought her a leather-bound album filled with old photographs, each page, a reminder of a life well lived. She kissed my cheek and called me her rock. For a moment I believed I still belonged. But Alex had a different gift. When the time came for speeches, Alex rose with a glass of champagne in hand. Everyone turned, expecting words of warmth, a compliment to my mother, perhaps a nod to family unity. Instead, Alex smiled too brightly, eyes darting toward me before speaking. "Here's to passion," Alex declared. The room grew still, the kind we never had at home. The words dropped into the silence like stones into a pond. At first there was confusion, soft laughter, nervous glances. Then slowly, real laughter bubbled up, mocking and sharp. My cousins chuckled, one uncle whistled, and even my sister covered her mouth to hide a grin. And there I sat, staring at the glass in my hand. Wine dark as blood swirled as I tried to keep my grip steady. My mother looked at me, frown forming, but said nothing. No one defended me. The humiliation was public now. It wasn't a whisper at a wedding or a hushed confession to a friend. It was a performance staged for family and friends with me as the punchline. I smiled anyway. That smile, polished and brittle, was the only shield I had left. My heart, though, was a storm. Alex took a long sip, basking in the attention, then sat down as though nothing unusual had been said. People returned to their meals, though. I caught them glancing at me, pity in some eyes, delight in others. Nothing spreads faster than scandal at a dinner table. As dessert was served, I excused myself and stepped outside into the cold night air. The stars hung low above the neighborhood, distant and indifferent. I lit a cigarette, something I hadn't done in years, the smoke curling like unanswered questions. I thought of the sacrifices I had made, the savings I had protected the estate. My grandparents entrusted to me the long hours spent building a life that could withstand storms. And yet here I was, mocked by the one who was supposed to protect me. I knew then that the time for quiet observation had ended. Humiliation had reached its peak. To continue smiling would be to bury myself alive. I crushed the cigarette under my heel and re-entered the house, face calm once more. I hugged my mother, whispered goodnight, and thanked her for the evening. No one suspected that inside me something final had been decided. From that night forward, I would not be the quiet spouse. I would not be the one mocked in whispers or toasts. I would be the one who ended the performance, who turned the stage lights back on Alex. And when I did, it would not be with words tossed into the air. It would be with papers, signatures, and the kind of evidence that cannot be laughed away. But what they didn't know was that I had already begun laying the groundwork. Every email, every bank slip, every whispered confession, I had them stored. All I needed was the right moment to reveal it. That night, driving home, Alex hummed along with the radio, utterly carefree. I sat beside them, silent, a smile carved into my lips. Only I knew what was coming. The morning after my mother's birthday dinner, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. The humiliation of that toast had burned away my hesitation. If Alex wanted to play games in public, then I would prepare an ending in public too. But unlike Alex's careless words, mine would be written in ink notarized and impossible to erase. I called Tom Bradley, a lawyer I trusted from my business dealings. Tom was a man of few words and fewer smiles, but his pen carried weight. I need to discuss estate protection, I told him. My voice sounded calm, professional, as if we were talking about taxes rather than betrayal. Tom didn't ask why at first. He set up a meeting in his office overlooking Midtown, the kind of place where every chair and framed certificate announced authority. I arrived with a folder of documents, joint accounts, property deeds, a copy of my grandparents' will. Tom leafed through them, his brow furrowing. You realize he said that if Alex files for divorce now, half of these assets, especially the one Faye, $2 million in savings, could be considered marital property. I nodded. That's why I want everything restructured. I want the estate ring-fenced. I want a trust created in my name alone. I want to make sure Alex has no claim. He looked at me over his glasses. This isn't just estate planning. This is preparing for war. Yes, I said, and I intend to win. That evening, back at home, I cooked dinner as if nothing had changed. Alex walked in late, claimed traffic had been unbearable, and kissed my cheek. I poured wine, listened to the stories, and smiled as though I believed them. But beneath the table, my phone buzzed with an email from Tom, draft documents for review. Over the next weeks, I built my arsenal. Quietly, methodically. I printed every suspicious email, highlighting dates and phrases that revealed intent. I photographed text conversations Alex had left open, images of old friends rekindling more than memories. I even transferred small sums into an account Alex didn't know, about a test to see if the joint account would be monitored. It was. Alex asked casually over breakfast, "Did you spend more than usual on groceries?" I lied with a straight face, and I knew then that Alex was watching me as carefully as I was watching them. One night, while organizing files in the attic, I stumbled on a locked box. Inside was the original draft of my grandparents' will, one that mentioned Alex by name as a beneficiary. But tucked behind it, yellowed with age, was a later amendment never shown to Alex that stripped them of all rights. I felt a cold satisfaction holding that paper, a legal blade hidden in plain sight. I sealed it inside a black folder marked with a notary stamp and placed it in my desk drawer. Every time I looked at it, I felt my resolve harden. Alex continued the charade. Lavish gestures, weekend getaways, expensive gifts. To anyone else, it looked like devotion. To me, it reeked of guilt, a desperate attempt to balance a scale already tipping. And yet I played along, because revenge requires patience. One must let the guilty feel secure before cutting the ground beneath them. The final straw came not from Alex, but from Amanda. A message slipped into my inbox by mistake. An invitation forwarded from Alex's email addressed to Amanda. A hotel reservation, a weekend escape planned for just us like old times. I printed it, slid it into the black folder, and closed the drawer. My hand lingered on the wood, calm and steady. The time was near. They thought I was blind. They thought I was stable, predictable, safe. But stability is a mask, and behind mine was a storm. The next family gathering would not end with me humiliated. It would end with Alex stripped of every illusion of power. By the time spring arrived, the trap was ready. The city bloomed with cherry blossoms, couples strolled hand in hand through Central Park, and Alex behaved as though our life together was untouched by shadows. To the outside world, we were enviable, a pair with wealth, stability, and charm. But beneath that polished veneer, my silence had ripened into something lethal. Tom, my lawyer, called me in one Thursday morning. His office smelled faintly of leather and paper, the scent of deals struck and futures altered. He slid a folder across the desk, the edges crisped the documents inside, stamped with authority. This trust, he explained, tapping the cover, separates your inheritance from marital property. The estate, valued at roughly $2.0 million, now belongs solely to you. If Alex contests, they'll face a wall of precedent stronger than any accusation of unfairness. I nodded slowly. And the savings? Already moved into a protected account under your name. Every cent is documented. Alex may attempt to claim entitlement, but the financial trail proves otherwise. I touched the folder, felt the weight of paper that could dismantle a marriage without raising my voice. It wasn't anger I felt in that moment, it was clarity. Leaving the office, I stepped into the bright sunlight of Midtown. People hurried past briefcases, swinging horns blaring. To them, I was just another professional carrying paperwork. None knew the documents in my hands carried the end of a union. At home, Alex greeted me with a smile, kissed my cheek, and asked about my day. I told a story about a mundane work meeting, laughed at Alex's anecdotes, and poured us both wine. The documents rested in my bag, silent patient. That weekend, Alex suggested we host a small dinner party. It's been a while since we entertained, they said. People will love to see us together. I agreed, though. I saw it for what it was, another performance, another attempt to paint the picture of a perfect life. Let them perform. Soon the audience would see the truth. In the days leading up to the dinner, I prepared quietly. I gathered the black folder, now thick with proof, emails, texts, withdrawal, slips, the amendment to the will. I rehearsed nothing. Truth does not need rehearsal. On the night of the dinner, our apartment gleamed. Candles, flickered glasses, sparkled guests, complimented Alex on the decor as though they had lifted a finger to make it so. I smiled, I nodded. I played the part of gracious host, but inside I was steel. At one point, Alex raised a glass, eyes shining. To love that lasts, and to the partner who makes it possible. Guests clapped, laughter rose, and my stomach turned. The same lips that toasted passion we never had now praised love everlasting. Hypocrisy tastes bitter when you've swallowed too much of it. I waited calm, patient. Because the real toast would not come from Alex. It would come from me, but not in words. The opportunity would arrive soon in a room much larger, with more witnesses, and with documents that would silence every smirk and whisper. For now I closed the folder and slid it back into its hiding place. My face remained gentle. My hands poured more wine. Alex thought the evening was a triumph. I let them think so. After all, the sweetest part of revenge is not the strike itself, but the moment when the guilty believe they are safe. But what Alex didn't know was that the next gathering, the reading of my grandfather's will, would be their undoing. The summons came in early summer. My grandfather's estate, valued at $2.0 million, was finally to be settled. The family gathered at the downtown law office, a solemn room with tall windows and shelves heavy with leather-bound books. The air smelled of dust, ink, and old secrets. Relatives filled the polished chairs, cousins whispering uncles, adjusting ties, my mother dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Alex sat beside me, dressed impeccably confident, radiating like perfume. To anyone else, Alex looked like a devoted spouse here to share in the legacy of family. To me, Alex looked like a thief already, pocketing treasures not yet offered. The lawyer, Mr. Henson, entered with a stack of folders. His voice was measured, steady, the kind that carried weight. We are here to read the final instructions of the late Mr. Carter. Please let us proceed with respect. Alex leaned back, one arm draped casually across the chair. I watched the way their eyes flickered each time assets were mentioned. Land, investments, heirlooms, the list grew long. I could almost hear Alex calculating, carving their share in silence. Then came the estate. The primary residence, along with its land and associated accounts, valued at approximately $2.0 million. Mr. Henson paused, eyes scanning the room. Is to be granted in full to Harper. The words hung heavy. Chairs creaked as relatives shifted. A murmur rippled through the room. Alex's smile faltered, confusion replacing ease. What about the spouse? Alex asked, voice sharp. Surely that's considered marital property. Half of that should belong to me. Mr. Henson adjusted his glasses. There is an amendment to the will executed legally and notarized. It specifies that the estate is the sole property of Harper, not subject to division in marital proceedings. I watched the color drain from Alex's face. They glanced at me, searching for reassurance, but found only calm. That's not possible, Alex stammered. I was told. You may review the documents yourself, Mr. Henson interrupted, sliding a black folder across the polished table. The notary stamp gleamed under the overhead light. Every page is in order. Signed, sealed, and beyond contest. The room fell silent except for the rustle of papers. My cousins leaned in curiosity, mixing with disbelief. My mother's eyes flicked between us, realization dawning. Alex's hands trembled as they flipped through the folder. You knew about this, they whispered, eyes wide with accusation. Yes, I said, voice, steady, audible to all. I knew, and I made sure the estate was protected from anyone who would try to take it. Gasps echoed. A few relatives exchanged knowing looks. Others stared in shock. Alex sat frozen lips parted but no words emerging. The mask had slipped. The performance ended. For once it was Alex who looked invisible. Alex who bore the silence of humiliation. I leaned back in my chair, hands folded neatly in my lap. I did not smile. I didn't need to. The document spoke louder than any toast, louder than any whisper. The meeting continued. Assets divided, heirs named. But the only moment anyone would remember was this: the spouse who thought they had secured a fortune, and the partner who quietly, patiently stripped it away. When the session ended, relatives gathered in small clusters, whispering, pointing. Alex stood alone, the air of triumph gone, replaced by the stench of defeat. As we walked out into the bright city afternoon, Alex caught my arm. "How could you do this to me?" they hissed. I pulled free, my voice calm but final. "You did this to yourself. You traded loyalty for greed, and you lost." I walked away, folder tucked under my arm, the sunlight catching on the notary seal. What they didn't know was that this was not the end. It was only the beginning of their fall. The days after the will reading were strangely quiet. For years, Alex's voice had filled every room, sharp, mocking, or sweetened with false affection. Now silence followed them like a shadow. Friends stopped calling. Relatives who once adored their charm avoided eye contact. At night, Alex sat on the couch, staring at nothing. The confidence was gone, replaced by hollow eyes and restless hands. I watched without speaking. Betrayal doesn't require revenge shouted from rooftops. Sometimes it only needs truth spoken in the right room. The estate papers arrived by courier, my name alone on every page. The house, the land, the accounts, all secured. I walked through the property a week later, keys jingling in my pocket, air crisp with early summer. This place was mine, not because of luck, but because I had protected it. Every brick felt like a promise restored. Alex tried one last time. They cornered me in the kitchen, voice trembling. "We can work this out. You don't need all of it. Just give me something." I looked at them, truly looked, and saw not a partner but a stranger. "You had everything," I said quietly, "and you threw it away." Their shoulders sagged, the fight drained. They left that night with a single suitcase, slamming the door behind them. I never saw them again. For the first time in years, I slept deeply. No whispers in the dark, no laughter that cut like knives. Just silence, clean and whole. But the story didn't stay private. Relatives whispered at gatherings, neighbors gossiped, and somehow the tale spread. How Alex had planned to claim half of a two-phase $0 million estate and walked away with nothing. Some pitied them, others admired my restraint. I did not correct the stories. Truth, after all, was already on record. I've thought often about that night at the wedding, the whisper that began it all. It was a careless sentence, yet it carried the weight of an avalanche. Sometimes betrayal doesn't destroy you, sometimes it frees you. Now, when I sit on the porch of the estate at dusk, I feel a peace I never thought possible. The sun dips low, birds settle into trees, and the house glows warm against the fading sky. It is mine not because someone gave it to me, but because I refuse to let betrayal take it. If you think I made the right choice, comment right. If you have a better way to handle betrayal, share your idea below. Families and money, they test us in ways nothing else can. And with that, my story ends.